Yeah, and so I mean, going off of that, speaking of growing plants like wherever, I've seen that there's this huge popularity now in like home hydroponic units where you
Hmm.
can grow, you know, herbs or whatever you want in your kitchen or somewhere. Like that's really cool. What do you think about stuff like that?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think that that's, in general in agriculture, I see controlled environment ag as sort of the direction we're heading as an industry.
Mm,
Not to say that like the traditional row crop farm or anything's going away, because it's not. But I think as we struggle with like water resources and arable land resources
mm,
and
mhm.
fertilizer problems and X, Y, and Z in a warming climate, everything else, like finding new and controlled ways to grow plants and grow produce is sort of where we seem to be headed. And I think like if people can get the little, arrow garden or whatever and stick it on their kitchen counter and have fresh basil or whatever, like I think that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it's so fun. My work had one, and then my grandma actually, she has, I mean, she's been a gardener her whole life, but never into like hydroponics or anything. But she bought this big vertical tower and grew tomatoes and peppers. And it was so cool to see her interact with it and be like, hey, I didn't know that this, this technology was around and that this is a thing. And then, they look it up, they Google it, and they're like, oh, wait, this is like on a large scale thing in agriculture. Like, I did not know that that tech was there. And here I am doing it in my own home, like growing produce, growing stuff. It's so cool.
Yeah. Well, and we're doing some research, and one of our faculty specifically is in urban and controlled environment ag.
Mm,
So a lot of her work and her grad students' work is in, hydroponics and different types of hydroponic systems. A grad student that I worked with as well is just defended his thesis, and he studied aeroponic systems.
okay.
So he designed like an aeroponics production system to grow lettuce just from like stuff you can buy at Home Depot. And it's, he grew them in these like big like black totes, like the packers that you would put old shoes in. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Use like these little mist emitters and just like a marine pump and put it on a timer, and it would mist nutrient solution onto the roots of the plants that were just suspended in the lid of this container. And in his study, we were looking at like double the yield compared to like a deep water hydroponic system and other
Wow.
stuff. And so yeah, there's an energy requirement and stuff like that. But another grad student 3D printed a whole bunch of aeroponic towers that you could grow like herbs or whatever else in. And he was trying strawberries and some other stuff. So like uh, the possibilities are kind of endless.
Mhm.
I think the ability to like go turn an old shopping mall into a food production center is really cool. In parts of the world, they're already doing things like using parts of apartment buildings to
Mm.
do vertical farms and stuff like that. So I just think that with the technology that we've developed and the technology we have, like the future is so cool in agriculture. And, we talk about how by 2050, there's supposed to be what, 10, 11 billion of us on the planet, something like
Mhm.
that. Like we'll have 30% more mouths to feed. And I think we'll meet those challenges. I think that as long as we can figure out ways to do it equitably, right, so that all those people have access to food and make the technology available in different parts of the world, like I think we can meet those challenges.
Yeah, this tech is awesome, and I think it's a great complementary technology to traditional ag and traditional farming. And before I forget, I love hydroponics, but you talked about aeroponics.
Yeah.
So I know hydroponics can save like 90% more water over the life cycle of the plant. Is there more? Can aeroponics save more? Because instead of just submersing the roots in the water, you're spraying it. So can aeroponics save more water? Or is it about the same?
We see that the water use is similar. Like,
Okay.
it depends a lot on the system, and one of the problems is that aeroponics is still fairly new,
Mm,
and so there's not really any like hard industry standards, right? With hydroponics now, we have like best management practices and like what is a successful, operation and things like that. And in aeroponics, there's only a couple of companies really doing it, and so we don't know. That's part of what our study kind of was to see like comparatively in terms of water use and water consumption, um, what's more efficient.
mhm.
And what we found is that in some of it actually used a little more water, but it also created a lot more biomass, like a lot more plant. So in that case, like yeah, we used a little more water, but we produced 50% more, 100% more material. So we're still being real efficient. I think one of the challenges is that, again, the technology is new And there's a lot of like moving parts. You have to have pumps and you have to have spray emitters that
Yeah.
can aerosolize the nutrients. You've got to have timers. You have to have lights because usually this is going to be done indoors and all this stuff. So I think it's a really cool technology. I think it's a really viable technology because you can like save a lot of space. You can do a lot of cool things. I just think there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered.
So let's geek out for a little bit. Have you been to the land in Disney World?
Yes, I have, and it's my favorite thing.
It is my favorite ride. I absolutely love it. And anytime I think about Aeroponics, I think about their system because it's so neat. They suspend the plants and they have them on like a carousel.
Yep.
And then it goes into this little, I don't know, this little vertical structure where the roots go in there and then it's kind of closed off. It's sprayed with the nutrients and then it goes out and it just aerates for like 15, 20 minutes as it goes around it. And it's so cool. I mean, they have like broccoli, just so much stuff growing that way, and you see these huge developed root balls just hanging there.
Yep.
It's wild, but it's so cool. Yeah, every time I go on that ride, my wife hates it, but she goes on it because she's like, I know you like it. It's okay. But we went on it, I think, twice in a row the last time we went, and it was amazing. The
'Cause
best
it's
ride.
so cool. It's so cool. Oh, no, I'm with you. Same thing, like, if we're ever at Disney, I'm like, "Hey, we have to go to Epcot, and we have to go to, like, Living with the Land because I wanna sit on a boat and watch this happen." Um,
It's so much fun. We did. Have you done the behind the scenes tour?
see, I have never gotten to do that, and I want to.
That one's fun. I mean, it's technically behind the seeds, which is kind of cool. But yeah, they take you back there. You can see the plant propagation rooms and all that. We held, I think it was an eggplant that was like 2 feet long that
Oh,
they
wow.
grew with one of their hydroponic systems, and I'm just like holding it, like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But yeah, I mean, if anybody goes to Disney, highly recommend that, and even the behind the scenes tour. It was very fun and very educational. My biggest regret in college, I went to UF, is not interning and doing that one summer. That
Oh, that
would
would
have
have been
been
so
so
cool.
much fun.
So cool. And I think that brings up an interesting point because you talk about like the giant eggplant, and I remember when I was there, and it's been quite a few years.
Mm.
But they had like a giant tomato plant. They had grown into a tree that was like 18 months old and had given them like 1,000 pounds of tomatoes,
Oh my gosh.
or something crazy like that, right? I think that points out to me that we're not like our plants have so much more genetic potential
Mhm.
for yield and for things like that than we can sort of match in a field setting, right? Because you've got all these extra stressors in a field from like temperature and wind and weather and pests and all of that. That we kind of hit this diminishing return point where at some point we're having to put so much stuff into it to get more
Yeah.
produce out of it, bigger fruits or whatever else, that it doesn't make sense. And then there's a lot of potential environmental impacts from like the amount of fertilizer we have to put on. But in a controlled environment, like it's crazy what the plants will do. It's like, no, I'll I'll live here for 18 months. I'll make a 10-pound eggplant. Like the plants, I just think it's interesting that when we talk about how do we breed better plants, how do we meet some of these needs, like, oh no, the genetic potential's there. We just have to figure out how to be efficient and sort of maximize that as we look at like future production systems.